In the first part of this two-part series, we touched on how the apparent audience for the lesson of the lilies of the field and the birds of the air were, in Kierkegaard's words, the anxious. We discovered how this audience should best interpret the message that Lilly wanted them to understand, that they should refrain from comparing others with themselves and hence be content with their own existence as individuals. It was then proposed that those who took this admonition seriously would be inclined to humility. Now, as pleasant and profound as this sounds, it is, at best, still only half the picture painted by the ancient artist of the Gospel. If we take the incomplete picture at face value, it appears that the roots of anxiety stem from the act of comparing selves, and that, if one resists the temptation to do just that, all anxiety dissipates. Yet as Kierkegaard writes, and as common sense tells us, this is not necessarily the case. For the fact that in moments of real need, human beings need food and clothing is not something we discover by comparing ourselves with others. Thus, being worried about what to eat or having anxiety about food is not directly invented by comparison. It is this anxiety, still with guidance from Kierkegaard, that we will be exploring in further detail. Along the way, we'll encounter the contagion of comparison yet again and discover its other form in this context. Then we'll see if there's any way to contend with it by considering the birds of the air, whose ignorance of time leaves them free from such anxiety. Surely, it doesn't take a psychologist to see that hunger is a universal drive among living things, and that much of what living things do is driven by a natural urge to satiate said hunger. Neither should it take a genius philosopher, including the one overseeing this discourse, to also discover that human beings often become anxious about how or if they'll be able to satisfy their need for food. So then, one would think that anyone is capable of realizing the fact that no person, regardless of status, is immune to this anxiety. For who really, writes Kierkegaard, is truly able to say that he is without worries about food? If the rich say it and point to their wealth, does what they say make any sense at all? Since the fact that they are keeping such anxiety at bay by means of their wealth requires them to keep a close watch on it and increase it because of anxiety about food. One could make the case that much of the goals people set in life are at least partially motivated by the necessity to keep this anxiety under control. Who then would argue that it's absurd to aim for success, or that it'd be ridiculous to devote oneself to acquiring a large sum of wealth? Who doesn't want to be rich, affluent, or at least comfortably off and fairly secure? Secure, that is, from ever being put in the precarious situation where the next meal isn't a guarantee. So wouldn't it be a crucial necessity to be so comfortably off that no trace of anxiety about food, or any anxiety for that matter, could ever foreseeably enter the psyche? Not according to Kierkegaard. A fixation with being comfortably off and fairly secure has nothing to do with the real needs we experience this very day, but with imagined future needs, he writes. And the person imagining what he or she might need in the future disrupts their own peace in the present by doing so, and, in so doing, they acquire anxiety about food. Such a one, writes Kierkegaard, compares him or herself to others, and to the differences that distinguish them from one another. And their worry about food is a relationship of comparison. But even if the anxious don't compare their circumstances with those of any other human being, if they nevertheless anxiously compare one day with another, and they are richly provided for today, they say, but what about tomorrow? Or, when they have only just enough for the day, they say, it'll be even worse tomorrow. Then they are still engaged in making comparisons. This bad habit of distinguishing between selves, if you recall, is what the lilies of the field addressed in the previous video. But now comes the main focus of the current one, comparing one day with the next, distinguishing between today and tomorrow, and the next day and the next month, year, decade, and so on. It can get to the point where one gets so caught up in trying to solve the perceived problems of some day off in the near or distant future that they remain too weak or lethargic to tackle or discern the actual problems facing them this very moment. This is precisely when it would benefit us to look to the birds of the air. Yet before we do, and before we misunderstand each other, it must be clarified that the anxious affliction we are concerned with here is, of course, not the same as the wise prudence that cautiously discerns its way and gives thought to its steps. Being conscious of time and impending danger, and having the ability to plan accordingly to respond to such danger is, in the words of our guide, a perfection in human beings. It sets us apart from other living things by giving us greater responsibility, a greater responsibility which, at times, we in our fallible state have difficulty embracing. For some tend to live for the pleasures of the moment and forget to hope, while others may dwell on dreams and forget to live. Consider the birds of the air. They neither sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Consider the birds of the air. If anyone says, Kierkegaard writes, "We've seen birds so often that there's nothing in particular to say about them," it just shows that they haven't understood what the gospel is inviting us to consider with regard to the birds of the air. They neither sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns. That is, birds do not worry about food, and they cannot work. They live without looking into the future in a temporal sense, innocent of time, in the moment, and they let each day have troubles enough of their own. And yet, your heavenly Father feeds them. He does so despite the fact that they do not sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, which is to say that the heavenly Father also feeds those who do sow and reap and gather into barns, so that those who provide for themselves shall learn from the birds of the air that there is also a heavenly Father who feeds them. But those who own nothing at all on earth, those who sorrowfully realize that they are very close to the happy company of the birds of the air, such also learn that the heavenly Father feeds them as well. Are you not of more value than they? If you remember, it was previously mentioned that human beings have inherited a greater responsibility by receiving consciousness of time and the future, as well as the ability to respond to the dangers lurking therein. To deal with these dangers, one can set some goals, come up with a plan, and then get to work to ensure one is prepared for any uncertainties that lie ahead. This the bird cannot do, for the bird does not sow nor reap. However, for human beings, work is a perfection, writes Kierkegaard. It is not, as people wretchedly depict it, a hard necessity to have to work in order to live. For what makes the difference is not that one person works for great rewards and another for crust, or that one gathers in access while another fends off poverty. No, what makes the difference is that the bird cannot work. By working, we are like God who also works. And so, when people work for their food, they work together with God for their food. They work with God and are thus God's co-workers. And note this, the bird isn't. He gets his food enough, but because he cannot work, he isn't God's co-worker. So, as we draw near the end of this presentation and of this series, let us not forget to thank the teachers of these two discourses, the lilies and the birds. The anxious learned from the lily how to avoid comparing themselves with others, while the bird taught through his actions how one should let each day have troubles of its own by not comparing today with tomorrow. In applying the two mindsets in tandem, one may perhaps be on the way to finding satisfaction in their existence as a human being. Then let us also thank our insightful guide, Soren Kierkegaard, who brought a certain freshness to words of old by giving us new ways to think about and understand them. But he who most deserves our gratitude should be the one who pointed us toward the lilies and the birds to begin with. Indeed, it would be crude not to give most of the credit to the one who, in the first place, made us wiser than the birds of the heavens, so that we may later be capable of learning from their example whenever we may find ourselves lost and helpless in the mire.